So, hello. I'm going to start this presentation in just a few seconds. And I want to talk about it before I start. This is titled, How the Heck Do You Play Netrunner? And it's sort of aimed to people who are like, just saw the tutorial, maybe they saw somebody playing online, or maybe they heard about it or saw it at the convention and hunted down the tutorial or played on the online services like Chirboga or JNet, like just did the tutorial once. But then you start a game and you're like, oh no, I don't know how this works. I don't have an idea of what a good move is and a bad move is. And I am not going to give all of the good moves and all the bad moves because there's a lot of like things that are like, you have to learn them. You have to sit down, do a lot of practice, internalize. But there's a lot I can just give to you that you can use to sort of navigate that really weird moment immediately after a tutorial, but before you start. Hello Jai, thank you so much for coming by. Just a moment, just after the tutorial, but before you start playing for real, basically, or when you start making these decisions for real. And I may make more than one of these because it turns out that even just doing this presentation took so long. It took like a day longer than I was hoping it would. So I'm just gonna say a few things. Hola. Hi, Lunari. Hi. So yeah, this is about, you're new, you just did the tutorial. How the heck do you play this game? And I hope you had a good time with the tutorial. I hope you had a good experience. The thing is, you're probably confused as shit right now, especially if you come from another card game. And this presentation is aimed at people who know a little bit of other card games, because those card games usually have a lot of things you can transfer from one game to another. And Netrunner is very different. And so you're like, I don't know what's happening. Fret no more. Fret no more, because I'm going to tell you a few things that are going to move you in the right direction. But first of all, this is not a few things. This is not an info dump. I'm not going to sit down here and tell you about windows and curves and credits and forcing and forks. I'm not just... there's a lot of terms and there's a lot of information. There's a lot of jargon. I'm going to try to be as grounded as possible. This is not a format primer. I am not going to give you every single card in the format. We'll see a few, but I'm not going to give you everything. I'm not going to tell you have to memorize this card and this card and this card. All of that will come with practice. This is not the place for it. I just want to give you a direction into it. This is not a replacement for practice. Unfortunately, you got to try things and you got to learn things. But that's true of everything. Okay. So let's say that you come from a game. Let's say you did the tutorial. Let's get into it. And the first thing you may think of this game is, how the heck do you win? Because in another game, well, you know in this game the corpse scores 7 points or the runner steals 7 points. This is sort of the way you win the game. But I've found that people sometimes don't think of it as the winning condition, because it's like, oh yeah, that happens, right? And it's like, yeah, that happens. But in other games, you know that if they have the 20 life or the shields or whatever, the life points, you have to go and take them down. In those games, taking the 20 life down to 0 is your objective. In this game, stealing or scoring are your objectives, depending on whether you're playing runner or corp. And so how do you steal or score? Well, the corp scores by installing cards and advancing. And like, okay, yeah, no, I saw that in the tutorial, right? And the runner steals by running and succeeding. And you're like, yeah, no, I saw this in the tutorial. But the thing is, this is in this game sort of the equivalent of attacking is in Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a means by which you get closer to winning. And that's how what you have to learn to do on both sides. This is the action that gets you there. And just like attacks in those games, just like attacks in those games, there are good attacks and there are bad attacks. If you played Magic and you attack your opponent and you have a 2/2 and you run right into their 5/5 and it just dies, you've wasted your investment, you've wasted your mana, you've wasted tempo, and your opponent now is in a commanding advantage because they had to do nothing and you just removed the roadblock. Here, it's not as easy to see when doing the thing that gets you closer to winning is good or bad if you just started. And so this is sort of a primer to give you an idea of how to think about the things that happen in this game in the terms of, is this the good thing or is this the bad thing? Because a lot of people I saw come out of the tutorial and say, I have zero clue whether this thing that I'm doing is good or bad. And so this is sort of at least a little bit of a direction that I want to give people. Same here. Gosh, I sometimes don't even know myself if what I'm doing is good or bad. So we're all learners, but a few things I think I got and I want to say out loud. So let's start. And you know that the very first turn of the game, it's the corpse turn. And you see here we have 3 clicks. We just drew our cards. So we said, okay, installing and scoring is the thing we need to do. Okay, let's do that then. Okay, let's install something. That's our first click. It's gone. We installed something. And then to score, we have to advance, right? Okay, advance. And if you played with somebody who was good at the tutorial, you know that this is probably a bad idea because now your auto clicks, your turn is over. And what can the runner do as the very first click of their very first turn? Just come in, run, pick this up. Ha 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 ha. You fool. You wasted 2 clicks. You wasted 2 credits. Well, you wasted 3 clicks because you had to install this and you couldn't even score it. So this is an example of quote unquote a bad attack. We wasted some resources like clicks, which are things that come back to us, but they are, once you spend them, your turn is over. So your opponent can act if we spend too many of them, even if they come back to us next turn. We spend credits. Credits don't come back to us, unlike other games where things can untap or whatever. When we spend a credit, that's gone, and we have to find a way to make that credit back somehow. And the opponent is 1 point out of 7 winning the game. That's pretty bad. Let's not do that. Let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back. Okay, let's say that we're still kind of hell-bent in installing this, which is fine. If we advance it now, then we're just wasting time and money. We need to find a way for us to be able to advance it without the opponent being able to pick it up. So what can we do? Well, the game has a way to stop the opponent. It's ice. Let's say that we have some ice in hand. We can put it in front. Yay! And now we can advance, right? We're set up on next turn. Of course, next turn, well, they will not. They will be here, and there's an ice there, and we're gonna be fine, right? Well, yeah, a little bit. It's a little better, right? Because when they run now, they're gonna see the piece of ice and say, I don't know what's in there. Maybe I don't want to go there. Maybe I want to use my click to go look at R&D. And that's a little better because if we are sure that there's an agenda in the server because we just installed an agenda, R&D is a little more. It's a little more protected. There's a lot more cards in R&D that if your opponent touches them, it's not a problem. Let's say they touch a piece of ice. Well, nothing happens, right? They lost a click. They wasted it. They saw a card. They got a little bit of information at best, but we're good. And you're like, well, the opponent doesn't have any icebreakers, right? They don't have anything. They're not going to come in, right? Well, we gave them some information. And Jai, I don't know what flat game state theory means. I still haven't watched that video, so I have zero clue if that's the same. This is just intro. Let's say that they see that advancement counter. They're like, oh, that's pretty likely to be an agenda. I don't have my breakers, but I can still chance it. I can still try and see what's in there. And they can come in, and now we have a problem, right? Because we only have 4 credits. We used 1 to advance the card, so we started with 5, and now we are 4. Now we have to spend that money to defend this card. And maybe it's a card like Tithe. It's a card that doesn't really stop them. And then there's a little bit of disruption, there's a little bit of damage. We haven't really lost the money, but then they pick up the agenda anyway. This is not great. Even if we spend money for a card that actually stops them, now we have taken this resource that does not renew, that's credits, and went lower than our starting total. We need credits to score the agenda. It's not great. And with just this miserable little pile of money we don't have anymore. Like, let's say that we draw something we would like to play, like more money, and now we can't on the next turn. So this is another way to show you that we have given a bit of information, and that bit of information sort of incentivized the runner, for example. It's a little different from attacking in games with a life total, because in a games with a life total, you can see everything that's happening. And here, it's a little bit of a war of information. When they run, they're never certain that they will get there or they will do something, but there are some things they can rely on to disrupt what the corp is doing. For example, they can force us to res ice and take our money away. Okay, so can we do better here? Probably. Let's say that we're still in that turn where we're just about to advance. It's like, okay, if we advance, we tell them it's an agenda, okay? Sure. Okay. Maybe instead of advancing it, we're going to keep the mystery a little bit. Maybe we can put a piece of ice in front of R&D. And notice that we haven't spent any money. We still have 5 credits. If we feel that the runner is coming in and doing something that we don't want him to do, we can res the dice, but that's not necessary. And again, the runner now has to think about their turn. They have to sit down and say, is it worth it? If it's not an agenda, it's probably not worth it. Even if it's an agenda, it's probably... well, they didn't ice HQ, but if they didn't ice HQ, probably there isn't anything interesting in HQ. We have created at least a little bit of like information warfare, essentially here. Yeah, this is not quite like attacking. It's a little more like playing blockers in a game like Magic. But basically what we're doing is trying to get to our win condition. And now the fact that the runner is going to get a turn before we can score an agenda is sort of throwing roadblocks that we have to solve. So this is not a new game. And around all of this stuff, there is a lot of writing, a lot of theory. A lot of that was for ONR, and it was in news groups, and probably you're young enough to not know what a news group is, and I'm so glad. But a lot of that writing is still up on, say, SteamHack, for example, which is a venerable website about the FFG era of the game. And there is no piece of writing about this game that has been more of a boon for me than this article over here. This is an article called The 2-Year Turn by Noah McNee. I can put the link in the description when I put this VOD up. It's an incredible, very heartfelt article. And I recommend you read it. But we're not going to read it tonight. I'm going to paraphrase it to you just to give you an idea of what Noah sees the game of Netrunner as. And I think it's a very good structure sort of to keep in mind, because there is a thing that he calls the plan 2.0, and I'm going to summarize it for you badly. The way I'm going to summarize it for you is that I'm going to take all of this and condense it down in 4 points that are valid for both the corp and the runner. You can see here there's 4 sections. The first section summarizes down to get your economy going. Your money does not renew. You need it. Second, you need to make sure you have the tools. For the runner, that's your icebreakers. For the corp, that's your ice. That's your disruptive assets. That is, get to the point where you can, quote unquote, enact your game plan, which means just do what the deck was built to do and wants to do. And to do that, you have to find the things in the deck that make the deck go. Then, disrupt the opponent. At that point in the game, when you have the tools, you can think about going into your opponent's servers or set up ice in such a way that if the runner runs, and if the runner is sort of forced to make a run because you're getting closer and closer to winning, you can make them do what you want. And finally, get those fucking agendas in the score area. Get those agendas, put them in your score area. You're the corp, you score them. You're the runner, you go touch cards until you see them. These are sort of the 4 points, and they're kind of in order. Without the economy, you can't play the tools. Without the tools, you don't have a basis to disrupt the opponent. And if you don't disrupt the opponent, you cannot really hope to ever break what they're doing so that they can stop coming after your agendas, or you can get theirs. So let's say here, we instead of installing an agenda, we did install an agenda. We installed something that got our economy going, like a regolith mining license. And now your opponent, even if we don't res ice, even if we let them in, is immediately faced with a dilemma. Trashing this costs 3 credits. This means that they would go to 2 credits if they trash this. And now they have to make the choice whether to get themselves in the bad situation we were in when we tried to go too fast, or let us have all this money. And we didn't spend a cent if we didn't res the ice. See what I mean? We tried to get our economy going, and we also got there a little bit of disrupt the opponent, because the opponent now has to make a hard choice on whether they want to try to stop us and then have to figure out how to get back to credits to play their sure gambles and their economy, or just waste the click. Hello. Hi, Josie. Hi. I'm recording a thing for a VOD. Hope you're doing well too. In fact, okay, let's look at the situation we were looking at earlier. But let's do that from the other side of the board. Let's say that we saw the corp installed ice on R&D, installed ice to make a new server, installed something in that server, and that was their first turn. And now it's the runner's first turn. We have 5 credits. We have 4 clicks. What do we do? Well, a thing that you may be tempted to do, because many of the tutorials sort of push you to do it, is run, right? But a lot of people I've seen that they see a board like this and they kind of shut down. They don't know what cards they could be. And that's fair, right? If you just came out of the tutorial, the only card you see that your opponent has is their identity, it's their ID. Everything else is face down. Everything else could be dangerous. You don't know what to do. I've seen so many people freeze up. So, what I'm going to do now is give you a few tools to think about this board, even if you don't know anything of the card pool. Maybe you only remember vaguely the cards in the tutorial. That's super okay. I'm gonna give you how to think about things. And most often what you will have to think about for things that are face down, for things that are unresed, is ice. You've seen the tutorial, there are 3 types of ice. Sometimes people don't tell you what they do differently. This is sort of how I explain them to people when I run the tutorial. Barriers usually end the run. Code gates will tax your resources and sometimes also end the run. And centers want to hurt you, destroy your board, and they will end the run less often. One thing that you've seen in the tutorial is that once you find your tools, once you find your icebreakers, then getting through ice is just a matter of money. Okay? You've seen that in the tutorial. You've run, you've installed icebreakers, you broke subroutines, you got into servers, you saw all of it. But you're here without the guidance of the tutorial. And the thought comes up in your mind. It's like, do I run here before I got anything? Before I got my icebreakers? And while you can probably imagine that the answer would be, probably it's not a good idea right now, I want to teach you how to think about it from first principles. Why it's not a good idea right now. We're running without tools. And so, let me give you this Unresed Ice 101. In my opinion, this is not like rules of the game or anything, but that's a ways I think about the game when I don't know what the game what could happen in the game. What we're about to do is a piece of jargon called Facechecking. Facechecking means to run into a piece of ice without having the tools to break it. When would you face check? Well, it depends. Sometimes you want to run because you think your opponent is doing something that you must stop. This is very rare on your first turn. There's also other benefits. For example, let's say that this is a server. There's 2 face down pieces of ice. We don't have the tools. We run. And what's happening is that if the opponent wants to stop us for whatever reason, they have to pay the cost of the ice. Prior to this point, the ice was hypothetical. It cost a corp only the click to install, barely. And maybe if they put multiple ice on a server, there's like the install cost, but like it's almost nothing compared to how much they have to pay for the ice to be real and stop you. So interacting with the corp, running into a server, perhaps even if you don't have the tools, is a way to keep the corp spending money. Because if they don't, you will get in. Also, another thing that happens, well, we know what this piece of ice is now. We have gained some information. Now we know that there's a barrier. Now we know that it has a specific amount of strength. Maybe it's a little too early for you at this point into the game to remember how much you break a piece of ice for with your breakers. There's shortcuts, don't worry about it. But at least you have information about what you need next if you decide that getting into that server is important. And the way I think about the things that can happen to you when I face check is that every time you touch a card, something can happen to you. And exactly what can happen depends on what your opponent is playing and what faction they're playing and what cards they're playing that are not from their faction, for example. But it's interesting to sort of think about the fact that, for example, much ice can end the run. This is a thing that touching a piece of ice can do, is just the run may end. And that's like life, right? You wasted a click, but we've seen that you may have gained some information. You may have pressured the corp to actually spend their money, because if you don't run, they will not. Another thing that ice can do that I try to keep in mind is that it can put you in a situation where it can do a little bit of damage to you no matter what your opponent is playing, or it can reduce your money no matter what your opponent is playing. So a way that I think about running is, okay, I could be damaged here. I could be damaged there. There's 3 pieces of ice on this server. I could get damaged 3 times. I could lose 3 to 6 credits, for example. And that's sort of like a guideline that is valid everywhere. And you have to remember that this can be for each ice that you touch, and sometimes even for cards installed inside the server that can also have negative effects of this kind. And that's a thing that I don't see enough people do. But I think it's easier to do if you know that for each ice there is some consequence that can happen to you. Sometimes you gotta jack out. Sometimes you get past a piece of ice, and for each piece of ice you have to remember, hey, there is a consequence perhaps for space checking this. And it's like a little bit of a gamble every time. But if you pass a piece of ice and you have no cards in hand, probably it's a good idea to check out. You may never know when that one silly tithe can get rezzed and mess up your game. This is not a Netrunner meme, but it should really be. Just walk out, hit the brakes. And the other way I think about ice is that each faction that the opponent is playing has specialties. So touching a card from each of these factions, it can have a variety of effects. It can go any which way, but the important thing is that each faction has one thing that they like to do that is likely when you touch a card. For example, we saw that the opponent is playing Jinteki. Jinteki is a faction that is able to deal between 1 and 3 damage on quote-unquote on average. Like, if you touch a piece of ice, you are likely to receive some damage in that amount. So you can start thinking about it in terms of like, do I have enough cards in hand? In fact, you can see here, for example, you've seen probably Karuna. If you played the tutorial game, Karuna will do 2 damage to you, and then you probably want to jack out if you don't have enough cards in hand. Anemone is a very common ice in Jinteki, and you can see here that when it gets rezzed, it does 3 damage. And you see here that the average cost for a piece of ice depends, but the sort of mean is around 3 to 4 credits. Going above 3 to 4 credits can let the corp do more. For example, a rite of passage is your opponent rezzes 5 credits, decides and done, says event. First subroutine deals 1 damage to you, hits something. The triggers again, hits an event. Second subroutine does damage, triggers again an event. You have no cards in hand. Third one hits you, you die. That's a lot of damage, but it is 5 credits. So you can say, hey, do I have enough cards in hand to withstand that size and done if you are above 4 credits? You don't have to memorize this, but you have to remember that when you see Jinteki cards, they will deal damage to you. And so having a lot of cards in hand can help you stop these effects. And that's one way to read the game. And I'm going to do this for each faction. For example, if you don't have enough cards in hand after you pass a piece of ice, jack out. Jack out. This is so important. HB, Haas Bioroid, is a little tricky because what happens is that it gives itself about 1 to 2 clicks of value, or it steals them from you. So if you run without clicks, you're more likely to get more negative and worse outcomes than if you run with more clicks. And also, if you run, you're essentially kind of giving them the equivalent of a click. Maybe they can install a card. Maybe they can recur a card from archives. Maybe they can do all sorts of BS that lets them essentially take an extra click during your turn. And it's a little harder to think about, but thinking about having some clicks available for HB is probably the one thing you want to hone in. Also, rarely, it will do 1 core damage. That's not great, because core damage, if this may not have been in the tutorial game, not only it does damage, like things that do damage normally, it also reduces your maximum hand size. So you cannot take too much of this. But it's rare. But, keeping in mind that you could be forced to take a core damage is something that may help you say, hey, maybe I'm not gonna run with like this important piece of thing in hand because then I may lose it to damage, or worse, have to discard it because I need to do something else with the fewer clicks that remain in my turn. These are the bane of my existence. We're not gonna go super deep into these cards, but you can see that Drafter, it will not stop you, but it will essentially tutor a card, like take a card back from the discard pile, and let me tell you, there's so much in the discard pile that an HP player really wants to take back. And then just install it during your turn. And this can be something that you have to face later, but it can just be part of their game plan. And now you have to sort of choose, do I check out here and try to use the remaining clicks to go there where they install the card, or do I keep going here? Is it worth it? And you really don't want too much of this. You want to make sure that you don't go through this ice a lot, because it's basically giving them extra turns. And every 3 clicks is a corp turn, and this is more than a click of value for them, right? Boomy shows you it can do a core damage. It can do more. It can actually install a program. That's a really big thing, but it gives you the ability to lose clicks, and that's how they get you, because then they push you to lose clicks. And sometimes if they spend more than the 3 or 4 average, for example, MIC here at 6, it just eats your clicks and then also ends the run no matter what you do to break it. NBN is weird. NBN will tag you, a thing that you may or may not have seen in the tutorial game, but basically just means that you now have to spend clicks and credits to get rid of like pesky tags that they put on you. And so for each card of them you touch, you could take 1, sometimes 2 tags, and you may lose credits or be forced to pay credits. For example, here, Ping just tags you. Ping, you just they res it, and suddenly you're tagged. And also, they're gonna end the run. You can see stuff like F2P. There's like a big threat of not just tagging, but also uninstalling your stuff, like bouncing it back to your hand. But the real kicker here is the thing that they really want you to do is spend that money on those 2 credits on the thing that says 2 credits break 1 subroutine on this ice. It's basically sort of a big consequence, because credits, again, they don't come back. You will have to spend time and resources to find them. And finally, you can see what happens, because if you don't get rid of tags, then it gets worse and worse. Doomscroll is a wonderful example here. It will give you a tag, and it will do 1 net damage. Again, every piece of ice can potentially do you 1 net damage, for example. But it will do so much more if you don't shake off those tags. And finally, these assholes. I love these assholes. I started playing the game with Wayland, and you probably did too if you played the tutorial. Every time you touch something from Wayland without the tools, they have the chance of trashing something on your board. And I was giving you sort of the average case. This I'm going to give you the worst case, which is trashing something on your board that then you may not have the ability to record, you may not have the ability to get back from your heap. Because it's so swingy and you can determine again. Destroying an icebreaker means that suddenly your plans for getting into a server wasted. And sometimes this is minor, but you have to keep in mind. Remember that whole thing about sometimes you can run and you can pressure the corp to pay? Well, Wayland can just pay back itself if you don't break their ice. They just get the money back. It's like, let me show you, to show you a couple cards here. Maskirovka is one of the best barriers in the format, because, yeah, they need 3 credits to res it, but what it really means for this to fire, for these subroutines to actually get resolved, is that they actually just pay a credit. And it's a pretty hefty barrier. I cut it, it's 3 strength. Like, it will cost you a pretty penny to break. Stavka is one of the bugbears of the format, and you see there, trash to install programs. Just destroy your tools. Just stop them from getting in, basically. And Valenxiao here not only refunds itself, but also makes you lose money. So, just to get back to the question. Let's say this is the first turn. You have 5 credits, you have 4 clicks. Do you run this? And the answer is probably not. But not because I'm telling you probably not. Because we are going to run those numbers that I just said in our head. Can we afford to get through a piece of ice that can do us damage? Especially this early when probably in hand we have some tools that we want. Can we afford to trash whatever is on the other side if it's not an agenda? And trash costs, I didn't write this down, but it's about 2 to 3 credits on average. There's stuff that costs more too, that is key sometimes to trash. So here we're thinking already in terms of like, ooh, that's almost everything you have when you start the game. Remember, this is the list. It's in order. And what we're thinking here, if we manage to do it, is disrupt the opponent, steal their agenda, stop them from using money, an asset that gives them money, take an agenda before they can score it. But we have forgotten to do the 2 points above it. We gotta get our economy going, and we gotta get our economy going because we need to have the tools. And once we have the tools, those questions, that calculus in your head, that uncertainty, that gets dispelled. So, how do you do that? You draw cards. You draw cards. You click to draw. Richard Garfield put the 3 best words in games. Draw 1 card and said you can do however many times you want as long as you spend a click. A thing that comes back every turn. And you know what? You can do it once, you can do it twice. Heck, you can do it 4 times if you need. Because your money is in your deck. Your tools are in your deck. And the thing I see many people starting the game not do is forgetting that the game does not give you cards and that this game is built, and if you don't know now you know, this game is built for you to draw so much out of your deck. Because again, the money is in your deck, the tools are in your deck, you gotta go get them. Go get them. Because if we draw here, we may draw our breakers. If we draw here, we may draw our money. And now, the entire equation changes. If we play that sure gamble, even if we want to face check, we will not be in that situation we saw, where now we have to choose whether to have money at all or trash the opponent's money. We can make the decision not at 5 credits, but at 9, at 12, at 14. That's a completely different game. That's a completely different equation. So yeah, this is all I have. These are things that I wish were clearer in the context of when you start the game. These are things that are a little hard to come by, unfortunately. It's people will tell you to just go face check ice and to die to ice, and you're like, well, that's a shitty thing to do. I feel like I have no control. And I'm telling you, yeah, that's correct. Sometimes you don't. But I want to give you not the thing about sending you to something that's face down and you don't understand what's happening. I want to give you a tool to go play the game and say, now at least I have some idea of what could be in those cards, even if I don't know anything. And you see Jinteki red, be careful of damage. You see purple, oh, they're gonna make me lose clicks. You see green, if they have enough money, they can trash my board, right? And you can make a little bit of things. For example, a thing that made me so much better as a player, somebody told me, hey, the worst thing that can happen to you on Wayland is that you lose a little bit of money or they trash your board. And trashing your board is bad, but running into a thing that trashes your board early when you don't have a board, that's pretty good. You can just say, I don't care you trash my board. There is no board to trash. And that's so much safer. And then maybe you can start rearranging your priorities and say, okay, let's click to draw our economy, let's click to draw our tools, but maybe we can first poke at this server, because I know that the worst thing that can happen to me in Wayland is that this server is trying to trash my board, if it's a Wayland card. And of course, there's influence, and you're gonna eventually face check a cheeky size and 10 that somebody put in an ambient deck. That is life. But at least you know that the great majority of that yellow ice is about tags. And so you can start planning your turn, which is a thing I'm not going to talk about tonight. But it's a thing that's also very important. And you can say, okay, if I take a tag, I have a click to clear it. If I take 2 tags, I have two clicks and 2 credits each to clear it. Right? So 2 clicks and 4 credits total. And that's all. These are just a bunch of tips, and I hope it was not too info dumpy. But I know how hard it can be to be in a place where you don't know what you're doing, and everything you do is hidden and scary. And I just want to give the tools to you to say, I can understand what's happening. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching.